Congressional Capital 16, New York City Hall 1787. Calling the Philadelphia Convention to revise the Articles of Confederation, enacting the Northwest Ordinance, and transmitting the new Constitution to the states, unaltered and unanimous. From November 1786 through January 1787, the nation's government scarcely existed. Congress, convened under the Articles of Confederation, failed to achieve a quorum for more than 2 months. Delegates trickled in and out of New York City Hall as winter storms and apathy paralyzed the chamber. Not until January 17, 1787, did the states finally gather enough for Congress to open the journals. The members read credentials and attempted to elect a new presiding officer, but after several inconclusive ballots, adjourned in frustration. The next day, the quorum dissolved again. The Union was trembling as Congress continued to meet with its benches half empty and its treasury nearly bare. Shays' rebellion smoldered in Massachusetts. The states were bickering over debts and trade. The Confederation was running on faith alone. After weeks without business, 8 states finally formed a quorum on February 2, 1787, and the delegates elect a new president, Major General Arthur St. Clair of Pennsylvania. A veteran of the Revolution, trusted by George Washington since the Army's 1777 night march to Princeton, St. Clair had urged a bold advance that turned retreat into victory. He later helped calm the Philadelphia Mutiny of 1783, protecting Congress from its own unpaid soldiers. His discipline and moderation now seemed the only cure for a government adrift. But even President St. Clair cannot conjure a quorum. Ill and often in Pennsylvania on private affairs, he leaves the chamber silent for days. When Congress reconvenes on February 19th, Lambert Cadwalader of New Jersey, a former Continental colonel once imprisoned by the British, is elected the USCA chair in St. Clair's absence. On February 21, 1787, under Cadwalader's gavel, Congress debates the report of the Annapolis Convention, the call to revise the Articles of Confederation. James Madison records the tension. Some fear that endorsing a convention of the people will undermine federal authority. Others insist the Union cannot survive without reform. At last, a chord forms, not in strength but in desperation. Congress resolves that on the second Monday in May next, a convention of delegates be held at Philadelphia for the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. With St. Clair absent, Cadwalader presides over one of the most important votes in American history, the act that summons the Constitutional Convention. The following spring, Congress flickers in and out of existence, meeting one week and vanishing the next in failed quorums. Reports pile high from Treasury and War offices. Foreign Secretary John Jay warns of British troops still occupying the western forts, claiming the states have violated the peace treaty. Delegates come and go, but on April 13th, Congress adopts Jay's circular letter to the states, urging repeal of the laws that defy the 1780 Treaty of Peace with Great Britain. Foreign Secretary Jay writes in part, quote, "The faith of the United States has been pledged for the observance of that treaty. Remove without delay all legal impediments and repeal or amend every act inconsistent with it." Unquote. Few legislatures comply with Jay's orders. The appeal shows how powerless the Confederation has become. Treaties signed in good faith abroad are broken by numerous states at home. Yet, even as the circular falters, Congress acts like a nation. Across the Atlantic, Thomas Barclay, under the instructions from Adams and Jefferson, has concluded a treaty of peace and friendship with the Sultan of Morocco, the first treaty between the United States and an Islamic power. But peace with Morocco cannot secure the sea. To the east, the corsairs of Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli still seize American ships and their sailors. Jefferson, writing from Paris, proposes a daring plan, a confederacy of civilized nations, to sweep Muslim piracy from the Mediterranean. On July 27th, Congress orders a report on forming a confederacy with the powers of Europe against the Barbary states. Nothing comes of it. There is no navy, no money, no power to act. Yet Jefferson's vision foreshadows the republic that will one day sail to the shores of Tripoli. On July 4th, 1787, with President Arthur St. Clair again absent, William Grayson of Virginia took the chair. A veteran of the Revolution and a member of Monroe's 1786 Northwest Ordinance Committee, Grayson had long sought an orderly plan to govern the new federal lands in the frontier. On July 13th, the United States and Congress assembled passed the Northwest Ordinance, which scholars maintain was its greatest accomplishment. Ironically, though 9 states were required by the Articles of Confederation, only 8 were present. Necessity apparently overrid constitutional law, with Dunlap's official journals recording that all 8 states voted aye. With only Abraham Yates, Jr. of New York objecting on constitutional principle, the ailing Confederation still managed to pass a landmark act, the Northwest Ordinance. A charter establishing a mechanism for the creation of 5 future states, a model of Republican government, and through Nathan Dane's last-minute amendment, a prohibition of slavery and indentured servitudes in the lands north and west of the Ohio River, thereby creating the first free federal territory of the United States of America. 5 weeks later, William Grayson writes to James Monroe, now serving in the Virginia House of Delegates, describing the new ordinance and its differences between Monroe's 1786 draft. He notes, quote, "The clause respecting slavery was agreed to by Southern members for the purpose of preventing tobacco and indigo from being made on the northwest side of the Ohio, as well as for several other political reasons," unquote. Grayson urged James Monroe to bring the Virginia's Act of Secession into conformity. Monroe, loyal to Jefferson's 1784 anti-slavery principle, championed the measure through the legislature. By year's end, Virginia ratified the ordinance, sealing the federal compact that will govern the Northwest Territory, ultimately resulting in the free states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Throughout the summer, Congress again lost its quorum as delegates drifted home. While in Philadelphia, the convention completed its work and, on September 17th, dispatched the new Constitution by stagecoach to President Arthur St. Clair, presiding over the Confederation Congress in New York. Legally, what the Confederation Congress received was revolutionary. Authorized only to revise the Articles of Confederation, the convention instead replaced them outright, discarding the rule that 13 legislatures approve any change and substituting ratification by conventions of only 9 states. Delegates like Richard Henry Lee protested that Congress had no right to even transmit such a document. Others warned that touching a single word would unravel the hard-won compromise in Philadelphia, because any alteration by the Confederation Congress would transform the new Constitution into a mere amendment of the Articles, once again requiring unanimous approval by 13 legislatures. In that case, the new federal plan would die in its cradle. The chamber was divided, but opposing the new Constitution meant questioning the judgment of the one man all sides revered, George Washington. The plan for the new federal government, along with its transmittal letter, bore his signature as president, a fact that gradually silenced most objections. St. Clair guided the Congress to a narrow path. No endorsement, no rejection, only transmission. On September 28, 1787, the vote was unanimous. Congress resolved to send the Constitution unaltered to the states for ratification. In that act, the old Confederation government quietly consented to its own extinction. In October, Congress appointed Arthur St. Clair as the governor of the Northwest Territory, entrusting him to organize the law and settlement beyond the Ohio River. To finance the new republic and promote Western expansion, the Confederation Congress also approved the sale of 1.5 million acres to the Ohio Company of Associates, a venture of Revolutionary War veterans. On October the 27th, the 7th United States and Congress assembled met for the final time, authorizing Governor Arthur St. Clair to negotiate a treaty with the Western tribes. Under this Congress, the old Union began its death march, while the new one was conceived. It had all begun with President St. Clair's forgotten election on February the 2nd, which is now celebrated as Groundhog Day, a fitting moment when the nation's destiny, like the shadow of its constitution, hovered between darkness and light.